Hello and welcome back to the Shaw Local Bears Insider Podcast. We're doing a little emergency pod here, Michael. It's Friday, the day after Thanksgiving, and the Bears fired Matt Eberflus. Flus is gone. The Bears, for the first time ever, fired a coach during a season. I don't know if that was something they were proud of or not. We've never really heard what George McCaskey actually thinks about that, but they did it. He's gone. And honestly, for me, I feel like this was the only right decision after the way yesterday's game went.
Yeah, especially for, if this was like the first time this has happened and that kind of stuff, maybe you can have the argument, something happened and, the game just got away from him. But I mean, this team has lost 6 straight games, and it's not just 6 straight losses. It's a loss on a Hail Mary to the Commanders. It's a blocked field goal to win the game. It's losing in overtime after overcoming an 11-point deficit. And then it's, you are at your 50-yard line with I think it was like a minute at the 2-minute warning, and you have a timeout and you don't even try to win the game. And I think that's the biggest thing where I feel like you and I were kind of both in agreement where I think we were like, Eberflus gets fired if it becomes not controversial, but it somehow impedes Caleb Williams' growth or the team's growth. And that's what you saw the last couple of weeks, right? Where Williams was, putting you in a spot to win a game 3 straight weeks. He did that against the Commanders. And he's 0-4 in those opportunities. And it's not because of him. Obviously, he played a role in yesterday's game and the scramble and all that kind of stuff. But it got to a point where you can't hurt what seems to be your franchise quarterback, right? And the Bears made it clear that they were going to fire Eberflus. And I don't think how many people are surprised that this happened at this point.
The Bears trotted Flus out there at 9 a.m. this morning. You were on the call, Michael, to answer some questions for 9 minutes?
Can we talk about how dysfunctional that is? That for all the Eberflus, talk about the in-game dysfunctionality and that kind of stuff. You let Eberflus go on a press conference at 9 a.m. They didn't send out the link until 9:01 for a Zoom press conference. You have him talk for 10 minutes, and then you fire him a couple hours later. That's insane.
He said on the call he had a meeting with Ryan Poles and Kevin Warren later today. I mean,
right. We have a story out there right now that reads that Matt Eberflus is confident he'll coach against the 49ers. You can't put for how much this is in the grand scheme of things, this is a game. Obviously, this is football and that kind of stuff. There has to be some human element to it where you don't let him go out there and make a jerk out of himself or anything like that. And the Bears did that today, right? They just were hey, go out there, talk for 9 minutes, and then we're going to fire you a couple hours later. That also, for all the in-game dysfunctionality and that kind of stuff, this is that is really crazy to me.
They did him dirty. They did him dirty with that. That was terrible. I mean, you had to have known. We're only 3 hours later. That just happened. You can't tell me they didn't know that was coming. It doesn't matter how bad it looks if you cancel the press conference.
No,
I don't know. You can't let that happen. Thomas Brown is taking over as the interim head coach. We got 6 games left. I mean, look, it does make sense. You have the extra long layoff here with the Thursday game. I think that made sense to give your interim head coach a little more time to get prepared. My gosh, Thomas Brown has really jumped up he's really moved up the rung here from passing game coordinator to offensive coordinator to head coach in a matter of 2 weeks. I mean, like you said, Michael, this had to be done. It's the same mistakes that were happening over and over again. We saw the running off 30 seconds against the Packers before the field goal. It's not the same exact situation, but it's a mistake in the same realm of situations, the clock management at the end of the game was terrible. Again, they had it's the same things happening over and over again. The field goals that were blocked in back-to-back games, you can't keep doing the same things and expect different results. And I think the Bears, honestly, they were getting pounded in the national media by football people. JJ Watt is out there tweeting that this is a disgrace. There's plenty of other people in the football world who are respected football people saying this is enough is enough. And I think the Bears had to make this choice. It was the only thing they could do.
And it seemed like, at the time, I think everyone was like, when that Hail Mary play happened against the Commanders, that was the pivotal moment where even at the time, you're kind of like, okay, like, does this team respond from this? And like, does it come out and, come out together and that kind of stuff, respond from a really tough loss? Tyreek Stevenson, obviously all the hoopla with that stuff. And you got your response a week later, right? Like they got blown out in Arizona where the offense just didn't look consistent, didn't look good. And from that point on, I think it just kind of felt inevitable, right? Like it felt like Eberflus kind of lost the locker room. It felt like the guys, for the most part were good a week or two after that Commanders loss. But I mean, after a couple weeks and after the losses just kept on piling on, I mean, the players kind of got more loose-lipped, right? Like they were like, well, I don't know if that was the right play call. I don't know if that was the right move. And yesterday you saw all the quotes. I mean, those quotes alone are kind of why you can't let Matt Eberflus go back into the locker room, because it's very clear that he lost the locker room. He never got it back, it seems like, after the Commanders game. And that's how you get a 6-game losing streak. Your players either buy into what you're selling or they don't. And it's very clear that they never bought into what Shane Waldron was selling at the beginning of the season when you're in offense. And now it's clear that they never bought into, Eberflus trying to, as he liked to see, get everyone together, circle the wagons, and that just never happened.
No, that never happened. I see you guys in the chat. If you're joining us for the first time, thanks for joining us. Hit the thumbs up on YouTube. That's a great way to support the show. We will jump on. Yeah, hey, the little thumb thing worked. We will jump on some of your comments here. Robert says, at least we can move on from all this negativity with Flus. Yeah, I totally understand the sentiment. Thomas Brown is moving up like in Game of Thrones. There was another Thomas Brown comment that was from Alan. Where was it? Oh, Rick says the team is going to want to play for Brown. I really agree with that. I mean, I think they, on like a person-to-person level connection, like he's a guy who played in the league. He's a guy who he's a 38-year-old black man in a black league. Like, I think that matters. And I do think that they're going to want to play for him. It's interesting. It's so crazy to see how this has all developed. And look, I don't think if you're Ryan Poles, you have to go into this thinking that any available coach is an option. But at the same time, like, it is kind of a little bit of an audition here for Thomas Brown. Is it not, Michael?
No, it is. And, I'm kind of interested in this decision because, listen, as soon as they changed him over to be the permanent OC, you could tell, like, the guys, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Caleb, all the guy, even Cole Kmet, like, they love Thomas Brown just based on what you listen to him, talk about him. They believe in him. They believe in what he's selling. They know that obviously he's still a young OC trying to figure things out, but I think they're more patient with him. And I've seen a lot of, whether it's former players or whether it's other, NFL analysts and that kind of stuff, kind of comparing to Mike Tomlin, where, maybe he's not going to have the same success as Mike Tomlin did. But I think there's a lot of comparisons about the style that he has and what he expects out of players and the relationship that he has with players. So it's a really interesting move. I personally still think that I probably would have let Thomas focus on developing as a play caller. That's hard to say. A play caller, and just let him develop with Caleb. Let Caleb kind of continue, his really hot 3 games that he's had here so far. And maybe you put Eric Washington in charge of the whole operation, just kind of overseeing things. But, I don't – listen, there's no good answer to what's happening right now, right? Like, no. I don't think there's a clear answer. There wasn't a clear guy who was going to take over. So, I don't hate the move. I think it's probably a good opportunity for Thomas Brown to kind of, show, what can I do? Here's how Caleb can develop under me. Here's my leadership. And, he's got 6 games to prove it, and it's not an easy schedule to prove it. So I think we're going to learn a lot about it.
No, and you know what? Here's the thing. Yeah, you could put Eric Washington up there. You could promote the special teams coordinator, Richard Hightower. We see that a lot when these go down. A lot of times they like the special teams guy because he's kind of the special teams coach is usually involved with just about every player. Very few guys don't play special teams on the roster. But I like it in terms of it being an audition, because he's a guy who that the players clearly like. He's got that side of the ball rolling. Would I like him to focus a little bit more closely on the offense and with Caleb? Yeah, of course. But you don't really have a lot of options. You've already fired one coordinator. You're running out of coaches. Why not give it to a guy who might be a future head coach? You already have him in the building. He's probably going to be a future head coach, whether he stays in Chicago or whether it's somewhere else. I mean, I'm saying that he is a head coach now. He's got the job. But yeah, like I'm totally okay with them giving him an audition, because he's an up and coming guy. He's 38 years old. He would be one of the youngest coaches in the NFL. I forget what the age is now. I think Sean McVay is still right around 38, 39, something like that. But why not give this guy a shot?
Yeah, I would agree. You got to give him you got to see what you have, right? Like, you don't want to be in a position where you're like, you see this a lot. Like, a lot of people like to say, like, the Commanders and the Redskins obviously had like 3 future, head coaches on their staff. Like, you want to see what you have on your staff. How does he handle this how does he handle this adversity? Because this isn't going to be easy. You've got the 49ers coming up in 9 days. Then you got the Vikings. You got the Lions again. You got the Seahawks. And then you finish things off against the Packers. I think that's all the 6 teams. So you're going to have a challenge. You're going to have to figure things out. So it's really interesting just to watch how this whole thing is unfolding. And, when it comes to talking about who, you and I, we have put together a quick, list that's out there. Make sure you guys are checking that out, who we think could potentially be a top candidate.
Mm-hmm.
But I am really interested to know, what is this process going to look like? I think that's the biggest question right now,
yes.
right? Is this Kevin Warren helping Ryan Poles? Is this Ryan Poles, doing it all by himself with Kevin Warren's blessing? I'm very curious to know what this decision process is going to look like, because I'm even curious to know whether, Poles talks with the media either tomorrow or Monday or what have you. I'm curious to know how is this decision made? Was this a Kevin Warren decision telling Ryan Poles, like, this is dysfunctional? Like, I saw a lot of people say, you reported how, Warren was in the locker room looking around, trying to, gauge what is going on right now. I'm really curious to see what is this going to look like? Is this going to be Kevin Warren's in charge of the stadium and that's it? Or is this Kevin Warren is in charge of everything and he's going to have a heavy hand when it comes to helping Ryan Poles decide who's going to be the next head coach for this team?
I think that it is telling that the press release included quotes from both of them, from Kevin Warren and from Ryan Poles. I mean, I don't see Kevin Warren and his personality and who he is. We've been watching him operate for nearly 2 years now, a little bit less than that. He's going to be involved in this. You better believe that. I don't see him sitting on the sidelines. But yes. What is the dynamic of all that going to look like? We're not going to hear, we don't know. There's no press conferences scheduled. We don't know when we're going to hear from them. We don't know if that's going to be this weekend, if that's going to wait till Monday. We don't know. And Ryan Poles hasn't answered questions other than the team friendly pregame radio show. He hasn't answered questions in a long time. We haven't gotten to hear from him. And certainly not since things have started to go downhill. And we really don't know what he wants in a head coach, because remember when he hired Matt Eberflus, I mean, that was within 48 hours of him getting the job.
Yeah.
There was no Ryan Poles press conference. What are you looking for in a head coach? Anything like that. And at that point, I mean, the Bears had already conducted first interviews with head coaching candidates. They had narrowed that list down a shorter list. I mean, it wasn't really Ryan Poles envisioning what he wants his head coach to be. And this should be an opportunity to do that if the Bears do it right.
Yeah, it should be. And that's the biggest if, right? Like, if they do things right. Like, at this point, it feels like you're beating a dead horse, but we need to see whether they're going to do that the right way. I mean, you didn't see it this morning, right? Well, obviously, that's not a organization that kind of does things the right way. I mean, this has been a team that, a lot of people were like, all right, get rid of your head coach last offseason, have him line up with your rookie quarterback, and then you can develop and you guys can grow together. And, that's something that, teams that kind of have figured things out do, where obviously this has not been the case for the Bears. So I am curious to see how that looks, what this whole process is going to be like. And I think the biggest thing is now is you try to minimize the damage you can do to Caleb Williams at this point. I think he's done a great job of kind of dealing with all of the dysfunction, for lack of a better term. Like, you've seen him put 3 straight games where he brought your team back from big deficits. You saw him do it against the Commanders in week 8. I think the biggest answer you have at this point is Caleb Williams is likely your franchise quarterback because he can make plays to win games. He's still learning. He's still evolving. He's not a finished product by any means. But if the Bears even had any sense of functionality here, they would be closer to 500 if they were just able to win a couple games. And the national narrative would be Caleb Williams is one of the best quarterbacks, rookie quarterbacks. He should be in rookie of the year conversation instead of being behind Jaden Daniels and Drake May because the Bears just can't find a way to win.
I said it on Wednesday before the game, and it still stands after what we saw yesterday. Caleb is rapidly closing that gap between him and the top rookie of the year candidates. I mean, he is playing really, really well right now, and a lot of the credit has to go to Thomas Brown. That's going to be your interim head coach now. Heck, they're out of the playoff conversation. Just go out there and see what this young quarterback can do these last handful of games. And you know what, Michael? I know we were talking about the schedule being tough, but there's always that interim coach bump. You're looking at this 49ers game next weekend. I mean, I wouldn't bet on I would expect that the Bears are going to make this really interesting. This 49ers team that's around 500. They've struggled a little bit. And you're right. The locker room yesterday was weird, and there was very apparent, even if the words were not necessarily obvious, that this team was over this whole situation. And I think this is going to give them some new life.
I think it will too. And it's interesting. I forget who it is. I think maybe Rick was the one who said that he's this is the most he's been excited for an 8 team. And I don't disagree with that comment.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with that at all, because you look at each game and you're like, well, the first half against the Lions was terrible. That was dysfunction. That wasn't good. That needs to be cleaned up, and that probably will be cleaned up. But there are so many pieces on this team where you're this should be a team that is close to 500, maybe a game over 500, if they just had any sort of rational decision-making, right? They had 4 one-possession games so far this year, I think it was, come down in the final minute. And if you even turn around 1 or 2 of those, this is a very drastic different conversation. So, and I think that kind of goes into the whole conversation about, what coaches are going to be interested. Is the pool going to be limited? I think it's an interesting conversation because, yes, the Bears don't have a good track record, obviously, of running things the right way and that kind of stuff. But one, it is 1 out of 32 jobs in the NFL. This is a very precious thing. And I think the other precious thing is that you have a franchise quarterback here with 4 years of control after this. You're in a pretty good situation with the cap space, and you got good draft picks coming in. I think this is a pretty ripe, opportunity for any coach, young coach, or even we had on the list, experienced coaches who want to come back and take over, because this feels like a team that's ready to go. It just needs the right leadership.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there's this team has players. They can. You saw them come back in that game in the second half. I mean, some of the throws Caleb made were really, really impressive. It's gonna be a wild couple of months here. Just logistically, teams cannot begin virtual interviews until the last 2 weeks of the regular season. They can't do in-person interviews until after the divisional round of the playoffs. So that's just something to keep in mind here as we start talking about the next coaches and what this coaching search is going to look like. The Bears have a little time before they can start doing that first round of interviews. And, the NFL has structured it that way in an attempt to get teams to slow down a little bit after there's been some pretty bad hires in recent years. Michael, we do have to get you out of here. I know you're heading to state football to catch some more football action. You're moving from the NFL back down to the high school range. It's you're all over the football world this weekend.
I am all over the football. It is going to be hard kind of getting into that high school football mentality where you're just what the heck just happened? This morning was supposed to be I'll cover a press conference and just hit the road and get ready for some fun memories for a lot of high school seniors and juniors over the weekend. But you see both sides of it. Obviously, you see the fun side of it when you're a high school kid trying to win a state championship, and then you see the grown up side of it where if you don't win in this league, you're not long for this league if you can't find ways to win. And that's obviously, unfortunately, what happened to Matt Eberflus here.
That is a very succinct way to wrap this up. I'm sorry to cut us short, guys, but we do have to run. Be sure to head to shawlocal.com to read all our stuff. We're going to get some more stories up there as soon as we can. Hit the thumbs up on YouTube if you're listening after the fact on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcast. Keep an eye on our Twitter pages. We'll let you know when we're going to go live. This has been the Shaw Local Bears Insider Podcast. He's Michael Dwojak. I'm Sean Hammond. Try to have a good weekend, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your long weekend, and thank you for joining us.